tinier shreds by the time they actually hit
Well,
Scarborough.
I think one of the reasons they're using this tactic is the fact you go into it, and this is what we'd said before about it being an unknown race, and also the fact Kittle's being out for a while. You don't know if you're coming in, you set your tactics based on the fact maybe Kittle's at maximum fitness. And so I think what they've done is, well, let's make the race as hard as possible. Let's start riding early. Let's start ripping it to pieces before people expect it. And as you can see here, they're literally driving it and in anticipation of making it as difficult as they can for all the other sprinters, because although Ben Swift is an incredible sprinter, he's best against once they've worn everybody down. A group of 30, 40, almost nobody can beat him. But in order to get a group of 30, 40, you have to make the race hard. And Sky are doing that right now.
Yeah, indeed, because we have concentrated a great deal on Marcel Kittel for good reasons. He's a class act on his day, and of course he proved that last year on the Tour de France. But Ben Swift will face other opponents here. It's not as if it's the Marcel Kittel show or bust. I mean, I Am Cycling, for example, have brought a very, very proven sprinter in their midst, haven't they? In Palucci, I mean, he can do some damage, Matteo Palucci. But he's there are a number of options, aren't there?
No, I mean, there are. There's a lot of the guys, I mean, like when you look at when they're choosing the selection, each team's choosing their selection for the race, they look at the profile months before, they look at the race. The bonus is the fact it's got no time trial. They'll take sprinters, but they'll take sprinters who can climb as well, which are a special breed of rider. Degan Kolb's a prime example, who's not here, Kittle's teammate, but there are certain, and Swifty's very much in the mould of Degan Kolb. And in order to make, they have to either take the coattails of the bunch and hope it's a hard day, or make their team create a hard race.
Yep.
And so I think we're seeing this is pretty cool, I think, when a team really does just say, look, Swifty's here, let's do this, and let's make the race what we need it to be. So that's what's happening at the moment. They've got, it's about another 15, 20 Ks, and it's going to be, I don't know, either it's going to happen or not.
I don't know whether he's enjoying himself or not there, Tim de Klerk. It was some sort of a smile of rueful smile of pain, or a grimace, or perhaps it was just a smile because he's enjoying himself. But these two, the gap there is just hovering at sort of 24, 25, 30 seconds to get across to those five. They're in no man's land. There's only two of them. They're against five. Oh, it's a horrible position to be in.
It's a bit of a strange tactic. I mean, either when you've got a break up the road, they see Sky are really, they want to control the race. They want to own the race, if you like. And there's a group of five riders up. So either you sit there and let Sky do all the damage, then profit off that. But it's quite strange to create a counter move in between the Sky-led peloton, because when they went, it wasn't as big as we're seeing now. It was only 20 riders. So perhaps they thought it was going so hard that they'd provoke other people to act and they'd blow Sky up.
Yeah.
But Sky's not being blown up. They're only using two guys to do this.
I detect the hand of Thomas Voeckler in those team tactics. I mean, he calls the shots on those teams, and in fact that was precisely the move that they played on stage 2 into Sheffield last year on the Tour de France, where they sent Kamina up the road, and then there was a double attack on a climb from Voeckler and Gauthier, and in that case they were actually trying to break the train of Cannondale and Peter Sagan and ruin his chances. But yeah, they're up against a slightly formidable opponent here.
That's one of the things you do, because when a team as strong as Sky is leading, you have limited options. Either you kind of hope that there are other teams that want to create a certain amount of anarchy. And if you do anarchy and you have a team that, because a lot of the time a team at the front like this, like Sky, you can see how steep this is.
This is uncategorized, by the way. This doesn't appear on the profile, so the course is full of this stuff. This is a proper little. This is like an Ardennes ramp, isn't it? The kind of thing that we've been watching in the Belgian Classics.
When you've got the guys in the front out the saddle, when you've got that many guys out the saddle, it means it's super steep, because basically pros, we try to avoid getting out the saddle as much as we can, unless it's an attacking move. It's you use so many more muscles and so much effort. Now on the left we have Samu Sanchez, has been one of the best ex-Olympic champion, one of the best climbers in the world. When he's out the saddle, it means it's really steep.
Yeah, indeed. BMC here have brought a very strong team here. It's not just Sammy Sanchez, it's Greg van Avermaet as being waved away by Sky. Now, talking of Sky, David, we're about to enter the critical phase with 3 categorized climbs and a sprint that will... Oh! Now there is de Klerk taking a tumble there on the road, and then there were one. It seems like he got a soft enough landing in the verge, but that will leave Kemenaer to do it all on his own, with de Klerk just losing the wheel there.
You can see it also, it's always a sign of how sketchy descent is when a team lets their lead rider go, because often when you're in the front, you ride your own race and you forget you're kind of so G'd up and excited, you forget you've got a team on your wheel, and the guys behind are thinking about the guys behind. In the team time trial, we call it truck and trailer.
Well, you can see there's
three riders gone down
three
from
of the Sky train have managed to go down, and seems actually a little bit reminiscent of the Poggio descent in Milan-San Remo, where they lost a couple of wheels on wet roads. So that will disrupt things. And I hope there's no damage to any of those riders or the riders following on at the back, by the way. So a couple of Lotto Jumbo guys down there as well. Yeah, that's created a bit of damage, that corner, for sure.
It's almost as if there's something on the road, because that shouldn't have happened. And that's a fairly innocuous corner.
And that there looks a painful knock at the very least.
That looked like Dunbar actually standing there.
Dunbar perhaps down. That was Tony Urel from Europcar also involved. Europcar then heavily involved in those crashes. A lot of damage.
You can see how super slippy it is. I mean, look at it. It's just slightly moist. There must have just been a little bit of rain or something. So this is what happens. You're riding. Yes, you can see the road is wet slightly, and there must have just been a random shower. So everyone's descending as if it's dry, and then you hit a patch that's just a little bit moist, and you're totally unprepared for it.
Well, Kemener has managed to get through unscathed, so he leads on his own, and all sorts happening behind him now. Tim de Klerk, who was with him on that attack, and they were a duo, he was the first to take the fall and hit that verge. We have heard on race radio, incidentally, that de Klerk remounted his bike and is back on the road, but he obviously hasn't made it and probably won't make it back up to Kemener now. That might well be his race done.
I think
so just under 50 kilometres now remaining. Kemener is on his own up one of these uncategorised climbs as they head over the level crossing there with the steam train hissing and frankly just waiting to plough into that and create more mayhem. Fortunately, though, the shutters are down, so we haven't got a Paris-Roubaix situation here where they actually interrupted the race, as the peloton with big holes in it now as a result of that crash.
I mean, this is what we said before. When you're doing a new race and in what is essentially, for much of the peloton, a new country. They've only raced the Tour de France or the Tour of Britain, and they haven't done it this time of year. They've never raced in the UK in May, and they're not expected to the roads and random showers and the technical descents. And it's easy to be quite blasé about, oh, we can just rip it down here, we can do this. These are the conditions. They're not used to the fact that it can be this changeable.
They're on a categorised climb now, on the third from last, King of the Mountains, the third of today's stage. This is the Grosmont, the Côte de Grosmont, and they're coming up in bits and pieces. That looks like it would be de Klerk there on the left. Still, well, he's pedalling ever so slowly now. He was the one who fell into that verge. A teammate now of his for top
Sky have decided they've got Lopez Garcia is the guy there. He's one of their strongest guys. You've got Samuel Sanchez behind, who's kind of dragging it back up. So they know the race is happening.
And Lars Petter Nordhaug also on Sanchez's
wheel. If you have Lopez
there.
Garcia and you have Nordhaug, you have Samuel Sanchez at the front of the race going hard, literally going hard, revealing themselves at this point with 48k to go. The race is on. This means it's ripping to pieces, and because, like you said, we've got 2 more climbs after this, and the last one, our record.
Well, there's sunshine here at the finish line, but out on the road, as we can see, with the rain-spattered lens and those horrible clouds glowering over the race, it's far from pleasant. This is makes great television, not so much fun, perhaps, for the spectators. But join us after a short break. "42 kilometres then, just over, remaining. And Peric Kemener continues to lead the way over the last the penultimate, I should say, King of the Mountains of the day, the Côte de Brixworth. Behind him are Anthony Turgis and George Harper from One Pro Cycling, Turgis of Cofidis. They're trying to get across to the Europcar man. And a very chaotic bunch, trailing by 55 seconds to the lone leader, David, where all sorts is happening.
Yeah,
and I wonder whether the attacks are coming thick and fast, and now BMC are on the attack, followed by Sky. But really, is some of this due to the lack of race radios? There seems to be a lot of confusion at the moment.
Not really, because it's not... In essence, it's not much of a confusing situation in regards to the front of the race. They know there's only one rider off the front. So what will be confusing is if, for certain teams, if their leader's not there, they don't know how far behind he is. So normally if you had your race radios, which you do in World Tour races, in a race of this level, you don't have a Pro Continental, essentially, you don't have radios. And so although there's a certain amount of anarchy that's going on now because there's no team controlling. We have had a change in the last 20 kilometres. We had Sky controlling the whole race, with a group, 2 riders off the front, and went through one corner. The break off the front got decimated. Well, as much as you can with 2 riders. They went from 2 to 1. And then the Sky, who were chasing, they had almost half their team go down in that crash, and then the peloton followed suit. And from that moment on, the race has entered what seemed as essentially a very controlled and rhythmic race to being what we have now, which is looking more like a classic. It's every man for himself, and teams are confused, and this is where radios would be useful because you'd know what was going on behind.
Well, Kemenair's descending off that penultimate climb, the Côte de Brixworth, and he's heading just 3 kilometres now to the final sprint of the day. And when he gets through that, if he goes through ahead of the other two, which you'd have thought he would, he'll pick up a 3-second time bonus. And you'd imagine that the other two chasers then will sweep up the other remaining bonus seconds on the road. So there is no incentive at the moment for the bunch to sprint, is there?
Well, no, I think so. This is the thing. A lot of the guys, the reason it'll be calm, a lot of guys will keep it together. The guys who are there, if Swifty's there, Van Avermaet, the guys who can sprint, who consider themselves capable of winning the overall. In a race of this duration, 3 days, no time trial, no summit finish, every second counts. So this next sprint coming up, where there is only 2 seconds and 1 second available, because that's what you get for it's only the first 3, so they get 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second, and on the finish line is 10 seconds, 6 seconds, 4 seconds available. Every single one of those seconds matters. So this will be taken very seriously, and we're going to get an idea here at the sprint coming up of who from this group that we're looking at is actually interested in winning the overall of the race, because you wouldn't do it unless you wanted to win.
38.5 kilometres to go is when the sprint in Whitby happens, and they'll have to snake through the town as well, which will make it even more strung out, I would imagine. And for the first time now in the race, as far as we've seen, we're beginning to see IAM cycling very active at the front of the bunch. You'd expect Europcar to be on the offensive, but IAM look like they fancy this now.
Well, I mean, it's again in that situation, if this is happening, if IAM attack, if teams are attacking individuals like this off the front before the sprint, this is guys saying, look, take up the seconds. So rather than do a mano-mano, the guys who want to win compete, like sprint against each other, they're trying to get their teammates to go up and take the seconds who aren't interested in the overall.
Yeah, that's George Harper there from One Pro Cycling, the domestic team, the young 22-year-old from Hampshire. He's on the wheel of Anthony Turgis. He's only 20 from Cofidis. A lot of young riders here, showing that they're prepared to attack and mix it, which is kind of exactly what you want from a race like this, isn't it?
I think so. This is it's a perfect opportunity for young riders like this. For a lot of we've got a lot of British young riders here who never get to race against these teams, and in a sense they're on their terrain, so they know what's going on, they know what the roads are, they know what's to be expected. Lotto hitting out there, that's interesting.
Fantastic crowds there, look at that. They've really turned out in Whitby as we enter town now. And just at that moment, you saw Lotto Jumbo attack there, and on his wheel, Thomas Vöcklers, the first time we've seen him show his face on the race so far. No surprise to see him on the offensive, but here they come, and huge crowds. Despite the temperatures, they've reminded themselves of the Tour de France, of July, of that sunshine and that moment, and this part of Yorkshire wants a little bit of it as well.
I mean, that's what's amazing about this. There's no other race in Europe where you get that amount of people out at this time of year for this level of race. It goes to show the popularity that now exists here.
Yeah. It's Kemenair taking his 3-second advantage through the final sprint of the day. There are only 2 intermediate sprints, and then, as you say, 10 seconds for the winner on the line. There's Turgis active behind him, and the bunch, well, it's not quite as strung out as it might have been.
Well, I mean, what's going to happen here is going through a town, because from the direction here, they've basically been going north for most of the race. They're turning around here. This is the ultimate U-turn of the race. Now, from this moment on, they're going to drop down the coast towards the finish. So none of them really know what to expect from where the wind is truly going to, how the wind's going to truly affect the race. So once they leave this town, and what happens when you go through a town, it strings the bunch out completely if they're going fast. And then if it is a crosswind, it's going to rip the bunch to pieces again.
Turgis crossing the line, it looks like in second place, and it looks like that George Harper couldn't quite live with him, and he's probably been swallowed up by the pack as well. So I don't quite know at the moment who took third and the final bonus second, but everybody now is through the final sprint, and they start to leave Whitby now and head south. And from then on, as you say, the line is pretty straight into Scarborough with a cross tailwind, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think this it's going to be basically, we've got one last climb, which is going to be very important, because over the top of that, it's not such a big descent, and it's got a plateau, and then they are in the direction they'll have to the finish. So whatever happens from then onwards, they can be sure that there's no surprises left. And I think that's what's happening at the moment. You've got everybody sitting there not really sure what's going to happen, where the wind truly is coming from and how it's going to affect them. and the sprint 38.5 Ks to go. So there's still a K to go to the sprint. And then from that moment, we'll see like behind what's happening, and then they'll be waiting for the climb. So everybody in the group that's now chasing is sitting there patiently, kind of keeping their cards close to their chest, trying to kind of bluff each other. And then once we get to, from now on onwards, with 39.6 Ks to go, we're under an hour from the finish. So in about, this is where everybody will start racing very hard.
Well, that was the remains of, well, that's, who is that, 91, that's a Cofidis rider there. That's Julien Simon, who seems to be struggling. So,
and Julien Simon's another one of the favourites, if you like. He's a very fast sprinter. He was the leader for Cofidis.
And the kind of sprinter, as you say, who in that mould of Gerald Ciolek, he's the kind of guy who should be able, in theory, to get over these kind of climbs and mixes.
This is what I mean about this time of year and this sort of new race. In team meetings this morning, Julien Simon would have been one of the kind of guys that people are like, well, he's a threat. Marcel Kiltel's a threat. And with 39 Ks from the finish, and already two of those guys that were threats are out of the race.
Well, there we are. It looks like actually Turgis and Harper are still out there, and that Cofidis rider who we saw go through in the sprint in Whitby was actually Simon rather than Turgis being swept up. So those two now, well, the peloton is bearing down on them, and they will be swept up as Whitby Abbey just looms up behind them. The race is so active, we've got barely any time to take in the sights, which have been spectacular. There it is, Whitby Abbey, and the famous swing bridge of Whitby, which we saw them go over before the race turned and headed out of town into what is going to be a very active part of the race. That's the end of that effort from Turgis and Harper.
The fact that that is Simon up there, I mean, that is actually, I was completely wrong. That means he's flying.
It's forgivable with all this going on at the moment. Simon, let's not forget, was another veteran of last year's Tour de France, and he was one of the two riders who were brought down in that incident with Mark Cavendish on stage one. Simon Gerrans, of course, hit the deck very hard, as well as Mark Cavendish, and Simon was brought down in that incident as well. So he was, in terms of sprinting, he was right up there, mixing it, wasn't he, with the very best on that particular.
I hear the lead cars coming through. That happens when the breakaway is less than 30 seconds. They'll take the cars out from behind. When it's a minute in front, you get a neutral service. But when it's over 30 seconds, you get a lead car behind you. So the moment that goes, when you're off the front, you know they're coming up behind you. So this is all happening. And we can see Cofidis are very present at the front.
For Sky and start again, isn't it?
Well, hence why, I mean, this is where radios do come in useful if you have them, because they could have rated. They won't even know that. So Lopez Garcia and I think it's Daignan that are at the front. They don't know that Ben's not in the race anymore.
Well, and I should add a word of caution. Nor do we quite, but those are the reports that we're getting. 29.9 kilometres remaining, and just 2.5 K now.
Here's another thing. If there are radios, these are the BMC riders, so they're on the front. We've got two riders here riding. We've got Ben Hermans and Samu Sanchez who are riding the front, not knowing that their teammate behind is chasing the two MTN riders.
Well, and their team leader, in fact.
Their team leader, effectively. So Greg Van Vanera is chasing behind the group that they're leading.
Yeah. 2 kilometres until the final climb of the day, and it's one of those coastal roads that if you've ever ridden them, they go down to the sea level and then they shoot back up over a headland. It's one of those kind of climbs. It's a 1.5 kilometre climb with a 10% average gradient, and at this stage in what's been a horribly attritional race, that's going to hurt, isn't it?
Well, this is the point, like I said, because they now know from riding this for the last few Ks, because this is the directions to finish, they know where the wind is. So from this group at the front, they're going to have to make a call. There's going to be guys here who are going to attack on the climb, knowing that whatever, they've got no surprises over the top, and that will be the move. This will be where Vukler and so the guys who aren't the pure sprinters of that group, they have to provoke action and thin it down and try and remove the fast guys, because over the top there's no strict descent, and it's a fairly strong cross tail, almost pure tailwind. I mean, look at this, they're literally sitting on each other's wheels, and here you've got Greg Van Avermaet chasing group. He's got two teammates of his in it who are riding on the front of that as well. So this is kind of why I like there not being radios, because basically nobody knows what's going on.
Well, there was an earlier phase when the race was much more stable at the beginning of the day. It seems like an age ago that you were actually bemoaning the fact that modern racing was so predictable. The breakaway seemed to be held at 3 minutes and the whole thing seemed to be under control, and actually we've seen the opposite of that, haven't we, in the last 45 minutes or so?
They've done a great job with regards to the route design. I mean, it all comes down to how you design the race as well, the parkour, and not having radios does I mean, I am an advocate for radios. I also like it when there aren't radios. I think there's room for both. Certain races you do need them, but I think in this sort of race, it's great not having radios. And in the World Championships, we don't have radios either. And it does.
And then another sharp left, which will then take them onto the foreshore road, and then it does get slightly faster, slightly more sweeping. Through that roundabout, then down a sharp little ramp they go, and then left. And that'll be the last technical bit under this bridge of what remains now. 3.2 kilometres to go. 3 riders will contest this. One of these will be leading the Tour de Yorkshire at the end of the day and take the stage win on stage 1. They're on the foreshore road now. This is where it's all going to get decided.
And when they come around this corner now, they've had tailwind for the last 25 Ks. It's going to be a block headwind into the finishing straight. So they're going to come around here, and unless they're going to go around the corner, you can see the castle on the top of the hill. They're going to go round to the right of that, all the way around.
Hugging the coast. They're not going to go over the climb.
And they're going to literally, oh, and here they're coming back, these two. Because you have to remember, it's like with these 5 now, they've got no threat from behind. It's a minute behind the next chasing group. So you'd be foolish to try and drag it out. You've got to, you just sit there and kind of try and let everyone else stress about it and save all your energy for the sprint. And because they haven't got radios, unless they're still very lucid and did study the race book and have paid very much close attention to the weather, they won't remember that they're coming around this corner as a block headwind. So you want to be starting the sprint as late as possible and being on somebody's wheels, so from like 150 metres out.
And another little dig. Here's the 1-2 that you widely predicted. That's Dijkman going from back to front, and he's taking Thomas Voeckler with him on this occasion. No immediate response from Sammy Sanchez, who sits there cool as you like. Lars Petter Nordhaug just looking over his shoulder to see what Rossetto still has left in the locker after that major effort from the Cofidis rider to close down onto the group. It's still up for grabs. I thought it was just between 3 a moment ago. Maybe it's just between these two, as Voeckler, well, again, some of the heat goes over. He flicks his elbow out, looking for an effort from Dijkman, but he isn't going to get it at this stage.
This is classic Voeckler. See, he's so lucid. He was following everything that's going on. He was staying off the back of the two, knowing that he had no pressure to make anything happen. He just had to follow what was going on at the front. And then as soon as they came back, he knew that then Dijkman would counter. And this is always a difference between the really great tactical guys and not. They don't hesitate. And he didn't even think. The moment Dijkman went, he jumped in his wheel. And now Voeckler's like, this is it. It's like now he's committed, because he can't let the guys come back behind because he's putting so much effort in. He knows that if he can take this to the line, he's got a very strong chance of beating Dijkman in the sprint, because they're equally matched. They are actually, these two guys, both of them think they can win. And also Thomas knows that Philip's done a lot of work for Nordhaug, so he knows he's going to be more tired than him, and he knows he's got more pressure, Philip, because it's Sky, it's a British race, the team's worked hard all day, so Sky's going to feel a responsibility. Now here Nordhaug's going to go again from behind. There
you go, and then there were 5 again.
Yeah. There he goes.
There he goes. As predicted, so we've had a 1-2 and then a 1-2-3 basically from Sky. This is the 3rd attack they've made, and each time it's Voeckler who has to respond. This time he knows this is all or nothing. Nordhaug, who you predicted was probably the strongest of these 5 now, has splintered it with, well, approaching just the 1 kilometre mark.
And I mean, this is a block headwind. So it's just like, if you can get onto the wheel, so each of them are just trying to get onto the wheel, and it's like, it's so hard now compared to what they're doing. If you get on, it's like safe as houses. It will be the difference between, like, now this is kind of Thomas, he knows this. And what you do when they react, you react immediately, because it makes everyone else behind you have to go immediately. If you drag them up slowly, then they get protection, but if you jump immediately, then they have to make the equal effort. So each one of these guys has had to do their own little time trial.
1 kilometre to go then, 3 riders out front, 5 still in contention. Thomas Voeckler looking over his left shoulder, swinging over to the right-hand side of the road, playing his games as he's played all the way through. He's out in the front there. Is that where he wants to be right now, David?
No, not with the headwind. I mean, because that's what you don't. We feel we're sitting here, like 800 metres from where they are now, and it's a crosshead. It's crossing where they are. Here we go. Now they're committed, Sky. They have to do it all in the sprint. They're going to stay on the left-hand side of the road, so the wind's coming from the right. So you want to stay on the left, because if you want to win, you're going to have to come through on the inside, the left of the rider, because that's where the protection is from the wind.
Sanchez now, a big dig from him to get on the wheel. As I think that's Dijkman, is it, there taking the lead again, or is that Nordhaug?
That's Dijkman.
That's Dijkman in the front there, and Sanchez on his wheels. Stefan Rossetto will not go away. He's still there. He's hanging on by his fingertips. Thomas Voeckler there, bouncing on the pedals. He still thinks he can win this, but frankly, any one of these 5 look like they can. So here they come now. Here it is, Sammy Sanchez at the front. Stefan Rossetto, the man who no one reckoned with. He's going to have to make his move. He opens up what's left of his sprint. A huge effort from Rossetto there. And to his right there comes Nordhaug. And it's going to be between those two. Voeckler makes it through, but it is Lars Petter Nordhaug who takes the win. There's a punch of the air from his teammate Philip Dijkman as he finishes behind him. In the end, the man who looked like he was the strongest takes the win.